All right, thank you once again for joining us. Here is Seth Davies, Managing Partner, delivering a session on communication, what works, what doesn't, and why. Thanks a lot, Seth.
Thank you, Connor. Let me add my welcome to everyone that has joined us on this topic around communication. If your organization is like many that I visit and my company visits, communication is inevitably one of the top 2 issues that employees cite on employee surveys. I hear things such as, I hear about things through the rumor mill grapevine. They never tell us anything. And it's a systemic problem in organizations, and it's a problem I think has been manifested by email, because I think there's a belief out there that email is a form of communicating within organizations, and I believe, my company believes, email is not a valid form of communication. Email is simply advertising. You're throwing information out there and you hope it sticks. And let's be honest, do we read every single email that comes our way? If you're like most of the people I talk to, you don't. And even when the ones where people put the red exclamation point that says my email is more important than the others, those still don't get reviewed. What I want us to spend our remaining time together today is I want to talk about, what are some common communication mistakes, why those mistakes lead to breakdowns in communication. But I want to spend the majority of our time on that third bullet point, on what works. What is effective communication within organizations, both inside meetings and outside meetings? And you may be sitting there thinking to yourself, oh, this is going to be about meetings. This is going to be about how do you communicate effectively in your organization. How do you have a structured meeting process so that key business information is flowing from the top down and the bottom up in the organization. And then once you're outside of meetings, what's another methodology, another way to communicate effectively within organizations? We do assessments at Competitive Solutions. We will go out and we will visit an organization, and we'll speak with folks at all levels in the organization, from the senior leadership team down to the hourly associates. And what we're looking for, what are the strengths of the organization? What are areas of opportunity? And we did an assessment back in April for a company down in Orlando. And these were three quotes. There are much more than this, but here are 3 quotes that I pulled from that assessment result from the company in Orlando about communication. I'm not going to read every one, but the first one was, I've been with this company for 17 years as Director of Operations for the last 6. I spend at least 30 hours a week in meetings. When did meeting attendee become my primary role here? And I spoke with that gentleman. I recall this, and I remember immense amount of frustration he was having that he wasn't able to do his job because he was spending over 3/4 of his time was being spent meetings. And he would get meeting invites, wasn't sure what it's about, wasn't sure why he was invited, but he was obligated to go because that's the culture of that organization. We're going to talk in a little bit about attending meetings and how we can have more effective meetings to drive that communication. Connor had mentioned a short time ago that we're going to do polls throughout our time together. We've got 3 polls, and Connor, if you would launch our first poll of the day around which one of these applies to you best.
We'll give you about 25, 30 seconds and then share the results. Ten more seconds. All right, and here are the results.
And as you can see, a little bit of everything there with us, folks. So let's talk about what doesn't work. What are some methods of advertising that simply do not work within organizations? Company intranet pages. A lot of companies set the browser when someone launches whether it's Internet Explorer or Firefox or Chrome or Bing. What comes up is the company intranet. And I don't know a lot of people that sit there and read the company intranet page to see what's going on, to see business results. Many times we quickly navigate away from those. Next is around check stuffers. I don't know about your organization. My company, we have direct deposit. I look at my check one time a year. I open the first one in January. I look to see how much I'm getting and how much money I'm paying towards taxes. And then after that, every 2 weeks when I get the envelope, I just file it away. So trying to communicate by putting a message within an employee's payroll check, Not a very successful way to communicate with that. Bulletin boards. When I go into organizations, one of the things I look for is bulletin boards. And what I typically see on bulletin boards is the government stuff that we have to put out there. Probably some memos or some postings from 6-9 months ago, maybe somebody looking for a babysitter or a car for sale. Not a valid way to communicate. Company newsletters. I'm sorry, and I had a gentleman challenge me earlier this year about communication. He said their company didn't have a communication problem because they publish every month a 24-page, 4-color newsletter that they mail to everyone's house, and they also post in the break rooms and the company cafeteria on site. I am sure that you're running home every night looking in your mailbox for that company newsletter, so then you can understand what's going on with the business, understand the mission, the vision, the values, the metrics. That is not a successful way to communicate. Meeting minutes. I am not a fan of meeting minutes at all. I think the problem with meeting minutes is this. There's a huge disparity in how one records them. If I'm doing meeting minutes, I may put down, here were the 6 bullet points that we talked about, the 6 things. And then next week, Jamie may be in charge of meeting minutes. Jamie may type up 6 pages of what was talked about. A little later, I'm going to talk with you about an action register, and also if you've been on these before, you know we've talked about scorecards. To me, the action register and the scorecard, that's really your meeting minutes. That's going to show you what was discussed and what was talked about in the meetings that attended. Email. I saw a statistic last couple weeks on an airplane. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal. I read this, that on average, only 9% of the emails you receive are valid and pertinent to you and require you to take action or respond. 9%. So think about that. Of the 100 emails you may get in a day, 91 of them are, quote, junk emails. But yet, again, organizations think, hey, we're gonna send an email to everyone, and everyone's going to read it and respond. Doesn't happen. And then the same old meetings. What I mean by this is people go to meetings expecting them to be bad. People go in there at 2 o'clock for a meeting, and they know it's going to be an hour of their life. They're never going to get it back again. They had a meeting invite. They weren't sure why they were invited. They're not even sure what the agenda is, but they show up at the meeting, and they sit there, and probably about 25% of the time is the content of the meeting relevant and valid to them, and the other 75% they're sitting there looking at their watch, wondering when this is going to be over with. I'm going to talk about how do we change that. How do we get rid of those same old meetings and have effective communication. Another slide around why these methods don't work. The broadcasting. Those ones I just gave you, those are one to the masses. One person is sending out a message to the masses hoping that someone reads it. So the information is only flowing one way. It's not a two-way form of communication. No confirmation of receipt or comprehension. I am sure that during this week or maybe even today you've heard this, hey, I sent you an email, did you get it? Or you may have asked a question, hey, I sent you an email, but you didn't respond back on that. Did you get my email? The problem with email is that many times we send it, but many times we never get the confirmation and the response that we're looking for around that. Rumor factor. Without interaction, when I'm talking about interaction, without face-to-face, two-way communication, the rumor mill, the grapevine, what have you, the discussions at the coffee pot at the water cooler are going to be prevalent. And what I've learned is what people don't know, they make up. And so if someone doesn't know something, they're more than likely just going to make it up for that. No standard mechanisms for feedback. These are all forms of advertising, ladies and gentlemen. What I want to talk about and what works in organizations is this: two-way, one-to-one information flow. Face-to-face touch is what I like to call it. Understand the parameters between the senders and receivers. We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. We've got an established rhythm, knowing that and I get this question all the time, does Competitive Solutions have a communication process? Absolutely. Our established rhythm is Monday morning at 10 a.m. We come together for 1 hour, and we talk about the upcoming week. We talk about last week. We talk about the business. In a little while, I'm going to share with you what I call a waterfall cascade that a company in Alabama that they utilize to communicate key information. The Department of Defense, who we do a lot of work with, they call it their battle rhythm of communication. But the key is there's an established process, an established rhythm on communication. There's standard tools and rules for all of us to follow. We're going to talk about that in a minute. This is communicating. This is what we've got to do. This is what organizations have got to do. They've got to get back to the basics of the face-to-face two-way to communication. And those forms of advertising, I'm okay if you still want to do those, if you still want to do bulletin boards and newsletters and emails, but those serve to supplement the message around communicating. I'm going to pause. Connor, if you would launch our second poll of the day, please. So let's see what type of response we get on your organization's meetings.
About 10 more seconds here. All right, and hit the share button. There you go.
So number 3 was the top one right there, a mix of advertising and communicating. So let's go back and let's talk about what works inside meetings. First, we need to have ground rules established. And I know that sounds pretty basic, but a lot of organizations fail to establish at the beginning some basic ground rules about showing up on time, showing respect. We're going to next talk about meeting rules. And I believe there's 4 defined meeting rules in every meeting that needs to occur, that takes place. Having standardized meeting agendas, and then a meeting audit process. And you may be sitting there thinking about, what's a meeting audit process? Where do we typically talk about how bad that meeting was, how painful it was? As soon as we're out of the meeting, we're walking down the hall, we're at the coffee pot, we're at lunch. That's where we talk about how bad that meeting was. I want you to start talking about how bad that meeting was within that meeting. So let's break down each one of these and dig deeper around it. Ground rules, arrive on time. There was a company who had a persistent problem with people showing up 2, 3, 4 minutes after the meeting had started, people walking in being very disruptive. Decision was finally made after 4 or 5 weeks of this. At 10 a.m. or 2 p.m., the conference room door is locked. You're either in or you're out. People tested the system to see if that door was really going to be locked, and guess what? It was. Pretty soon, the culture changed and people started showing up on time. Come prepared. Look at the agenda in advance. Look at your scorecard in advance. Look at the action order. Come prepared with the answers so you're sitting there talking about something one time and you're not having to get back to people next week on it. No smartphones or BlackBerries. I'm amazed at the people at the meetings I attend, and there's people always in there with their smartphones, their iPhones, their BlackBerries, Android phones, underneath the table texting or emailing. And they truly believe that no one sees what they're doing. Eliminate those. And at the end, when we talk about meeting process, I'm going to tell you what a company in Knoxville, Tennessee did with that very issue right there. One speaker at a time. Be respectful. Let someone finish their thought before you then jump in. Got to slow down and let people talk and finish their thoughts with that. Participation is not optional. If you can't attend that meeting, you need to send a prepared delegate. Someone that's aware of what the agenda is about, what the meeting is about, that can speak to metrics on the scorecard, that can speak to actions on the action register. So have someone prepared and ready to go with that. Next one I want to talk about is the meeting participation role. I told you there's 4 of them. First one is the meeting facilitator. And by the way, I like these roles to rotate once a month. So it's the meeting facilitator is the same person for the month of July, and then they rotate at the start of August. But the meeting facilitator, the person that ensures the meeting starts on time, the person that ensures it ends on time, they make sure that the agenda is followed. If they see that a discussion is going the wrong way, what I mean by that is going down the wrong track and the meeting's about to get hijacked, they say, what's the action here? And in a minute I'll talk about the action register. But what's the action here? What do we need to decide? And maybe 2 people need to get together in the hallway afterwards. Maybe there needs to be a separate meeting of a smaller group of people. But ask the question, what's the action here? The next meeting role is the action register keeper. This is the person that as that meeting is going on and they hear things such as, I will, someone should, let's do this. Those are action terms. Those are people volunteering to do something. And let's have an action register keeper person in the meeting. They write down those actions, and then we review them at the end of our meeting to make sure people know what they need to do. But many times you go into a meeting, you talk about something, you come back to the next meeting, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, Will said last meeting that he was going to do it, and he hadn't done it. It's because you failed to capture the first time what Will said he was going to do or what Will was assigned. The next one is the pass-up, pass-down person. Pass-up, pass-down is a bulletized briefing. What are 3, 4, 5 things we want everybody in our organization to talk about? And later on, I'm going to show you a diagram of how this works. But as that meeting's taking place and someone says, hey, this is a pass down. This comes from the IT group. Here's a pass down. We're upgrading the servers over the weekend. When you come in Monday morning and you can't log on the network, just reboot your machine. Don't call the help desk and issue a trouble ticket. What are the key pieces of information we need everyone in our organization to know the next 7 days? And then the fourth meeting role is a participant. And what I mean by a participant is someone who is actively engaged, that participates in the meeting. They have the answers. They're volunteering for actions within that meeting. So let's talk about the next component of a successful communication, successful meetings, a standard meeting agenda. And this needs to be set forth by the leader in the organization or leaders in the organization that says every team is going to have a weekly communication meeting, and here are the topics they're going to talk about. The teams can certainly add to this agenda, but what they cannot do is take away these agenda items. This is a standard meeting agenda, so no matter if I'm in the boardroom of the senior leadership team or I'm down in the customer service department or the finance department, this is the standard meeting agenda all the teams follow strictly for communication purposes. First one is the action register. You may be saying, what's an action register? Here it is. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pull this action register out, and we're going to look at column number 1, what was the action? Column number 2 is who's the owner? Who was accountable to getting that action completed? Only one person's name there. We can't put Will, Bo, and Mary's name down there because when you walk into the meeting, all 3 of them are going to think the other person's done it. The target date, when was that action due? Most actions take about 7 to 14 days. So if your meeting cycle is every 7 days, every 14 days, probably more than likely due that action is due within the next 7 to 14 days around that. And then when is it completed by? And that becomes an accountability piece. But the key is you're documenting what people say they're going to do. You got the critical tasks, the ownership responsibilities, and the target dates on there. Next component on the standard meeting agenda is a scorecard review. And if you think about your team, think about your organization, what's the only thing the people on your team have in common? It's the business. Many times we spend too much time in conflict and not what we have in common, the business. If your meeting's 30 minutes, you're going to spend probably about 18 minutes on the scorecard. This is the focal point. This is what's driving your team is the scorecard. And any metric that's red on that scorecard, you got to talk about why are we red and what are we going to do about it. And the what are we going to do about it, that goes on the action register. And as I click through the next 2, you're going to see the linkage and what I'm talking about here. Teams absolutely love what I'm about to show you because it puts them in control of the business. They're the ones that are closest to their metrics, not their manager, not the vice president. So teams love coming together, talking, diagnosing performance. Why are we red on our scorecard? What do we need to do about it? So here you see that linkage with supplier defects. First thing they're going to do is which ones are exceeding 5%, and then you see on-time delivery is a metric on their scorecard they're below target on. They're going to come up with a tracking system around that. So the scorecards is the second item on the agenda. Third item is around the table. And this is what I call the engagement piece, where you give people the opportunity to raise issues, questions, or concerns. And someone may say, I have nothing, I'm going to pass this week. I'm okay with that. But give everyone the opportunity to raise issues, questions, and concerns around that. Make sure you put a time limit on this for individuals, because what takes me 45 seconds to say, it may take John 5 minutes to articulate. So make sure you put a time limit on that. Next one on there is recognition. If you've been on these webinars in the past, you know how passionate I am about recognition in organizations, because I think as the culture of many organizations is to go out and provide feedback when things aren't going very well. But what we fail to do is provide recognition when things are going great. And so it's a mental trigger. Put it on there and say, hey, I want to recognize Kathy and the IT group because Friday afternoon when the power went out and the servers went down, Kathy was here till 8 o'clock on Friday night getting the servers up and running, so Monday morning when we came into work, we were back online. Provide that recognition to the employees that do it, and this right here will serve as that mental trigger for you that you need to. Pass up, pass down. I mentioned it before. The pass up, pass down is a bulletized briefing. What are 3, 4, 5 items we want to share within the organization? And here's how the pass up, pass down works. You'll see this is a simple org chart. What I'm showing you here, this is that waterfall, that cascade, that battle rhythm I talked about earlier. The senior leadership team, they meet first. They're the first team to meet to have a weekly communication meeting. They meet Monday morning at 9 a.m. They follow that agenda that I'm showing you. During that meeting, HR may say, I have a pass-down item to all our employees, and this is regarding the new benefits plan. And IT may say, well, I have a pass-down item for all employees. This is about the new server upgrade. Sales and marketing may say, I have a new pass-down item about a new product that's going up. Obviously, each one of those examples will be much more detailed. The pass-down person's capturing those. When that meeting's over with, the pass-down person distributes those to everyone in that team. So that meeting's over, let's say Monday at 9, it goes Monday from 9 to 9:45. At 11 a.m. within this organization, level 2 meets. They follow that exact same meeting agenda. When they get to the pass up, pass down, the leader of the team pulls out and says, here are the 3 pass down items, one from HR, one from IT, one from sales and marketing. The process replicates itself. It waterfalls. It cascades down in the organization. When we get down to level 4, Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., someone may have a question about the HR one, and they may say, hey, do we go to the HR office or we just contact our local representative? We don't know the answer to that, but what we're going to do is we're going to pass it up. So there's your pass up, pass down process. Many organizations, companies that I've worked with, they've got upwards of 7,000 employees. Companies may have 40 employees. It doesn't matter the size. Within 24 hours, every employee in your organization has attended a weekly communication meeting following a standard agenda, and they've received the pass down, the critical key information from the leadership team for that coming week. Late last year, I got a phone call from a company I'd started working with, and this was from the vice president of the organization. It was surprising to get this call from him. But he asked me the question. He said, Seth, there are people in suits walking around our building right now. Do you know anything about this? Are we up for sale? Are they trying to acquire us? Are we merging? A lot of angst and anxiety in that person's voice. Well, it turns out 24 hours they learned sales and marketing was touring a new customer, but they had failed to share that information because they didn't have a defined documented process in place to share that information. They didn't have a way to pass it down throughout the organization. Next one's around our action register review. Real quickly, just there was 4 actions that came out of the meeting. The action register, keeper recaps them, signs accountability, signs a target date with that. Meeting audit. Again, where do you typically talk about how bad the meeting was? Outside of the meeting. So what you need to do is to spend time within that meeting talking about this process right here. Ask the questions, did this meeting advance the business? What adjustments can be made? I gave you an example before about the company in Knoxville with cell phones. It was decided cell phones were not allowed in meetings, and you would have thought you were asking people to give up their firstborn child. People said, oh, I can't do that. I can't leave my cell phone at the receptionist desk. What if my kid's school calls? Or what if my spouse calls? So here's what they did. There's a sticky note on the receptionist desk. You write on there, if these names or numbers call me, please come get me. Solve that process right now. They have very effective meetings because they talked about the meeting process. I want to share with you real quick. This is a company in Alabama, and they have what they call a waterfall process. And I don't know if you can, hopefully you can see this, but you'll see right here, number 3, the site leadership team. They start the meeting process up Monday from 9:30 to 11:30. They come together. The next level team, the operations team, they meet at 1. The quality, the safety team, they meet on Mondays. You can see how this cascades down. This is how they've got their process set up so that you'll see right here, this is the last meeting of the week, the last weekly communication meeting of the week. By Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning, or 8:30 actually, every person at this site, and they've got 2,100 employees, have attended a meeting and have been communicated with and heard the information for the week. So that's the meetings waterfall there. Talks about the standardized tools, having action registers and scorecards in place, all connected with the pass up, the pass down with that, and then the external audits around that. I'm going to pause now. Connor, if you'd launch our third and final poll of the day, please.
All right, 10 more seconds. All right, closing that out, and here are the results.
Pass-up, pass-down process is the winner around that. All right, so folks, let me start at the beginning, tie this all together. True communication occurs in organizations when you communicate instead of advertise. Remember, advertising, emails, bulletin boards, newsletters, check stuffers, they supplement the message of communication. You need to have that face-to-face touch communication, whether it's a daily 5-minute startup meeting or a weekly 30-minute meeting. Get together and talk about standard processes. Remember the standard processes? Meeting roles, ground rules, standardized agendas, battle rhythm, the consistency of knowing that every Monday morning at 11 a.m. I'm meeting with my team. We've got the agendas, the action registers, the ground rules. The pass-up, pass-down is used to facilitate communication from the top down and then from the bottom up when they have questions around that. And then continually audit that meeting process, ask the questions, did this meeting advance the business? Connor, I want to pause now and see if we had any questions come in during our time together.
Absolutely. I noticed quite a bit of questions here. We're asking about scorecards and action registers, and we do other webinars on those, so keep an eye out for those in the future. Speaking of questions on communication, when you were on the slide about the ground rules and talking about coming prepared, someone asked, you know, what if I am asked to attend a meeting, but I have no agenda to review and I have no idea about the topic? How can I come prepared?
Yeah, great question. Company I work with up in Northern Virginia, they made the decision that if you get a meeting invite and there's not an agenda or a summary of what that meeting is going to be about, that's a get-out-of-jail card free. That means you do not have to accept that invitation. You do not have to attend that meeting. Why go to a meeting if you don't know what it's going to be talked about if there's not an agenda and you're not prepared? The example I gave you about you don't have to respond, that's an extreme example. But I think you got to say, before I respond to this, I want to know what this is about and this is relevant to me, and also know, am I the right person to attend this meeting? Is there someone else, is there a delegate that I could send in my absence that could do a more effective job for us? Time for one more?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Another one here, you were talking about attempts at communication and things that don't work, and you said you're really not a fan of meeting minutes. Someone asked, well, if you don't want to use meeting minutes, then what would you recommend? Doing away with minutes altogether?
Yeah, I would recommend abolishing meeting minutes, not to have those. One, because I think it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort to put them together. Two, I don't think people will actually read them. They'll either just delete the email or take the piece of paper and put it in their trash can. Again, the action register that I showed you, and we've got, as Connor mentioned, we've got webinars just on accountability and action registers out there on our website. But that provides a very good overview of what was talked about in that meeting, as does your scorecard, because those two, the scorecard and the action register, they go hand in hand. They're linked together. You can't have one without the other. So I believe if you look at the action register to see what were the actions that were taken, I think that's really going to give you a good sense of what were the topics in that meeting, what are the hot buttons for that team. Folks, I want to wrap up. I want to thank you for attending. Remember, we're going to give you a survey right at the end in about 15 seconds. We did a lot of social media surveying this month around communication and meetings. If you'd like some information on the results, let us know. That meetings waterfall I just showed you with that company in Alabama, be more than happy to share that with you as well. Every Tuesday at 11 Eastern, we email out weekly Tuesday tips on different management topics. So be looking for that. And then next month, my colleague, Paul Campbell, scorecard expert, he is going to be doing a webinar on using scorecard for business success in all areas of your organization. What I mean by all areas, finance, IT, HR, customer service. How do you build meaningful business metric scorecards around those topics? Don't forget to visit us on our website, processbasedleadership.com. Hope you have a great week. I hope next week, the week of 4th of July, you celebrate our country's independence, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the future. Thanks so much.